This is Talent in the Age of AI, the podcast helping leaders navigate what AI means for their people, their culture, and their future. We talk with the thinkers and practitioners shaping how we work, learn, and lead, and what it takes to keep talent growing in a world that's constantly changing. We create, curate, and connect the insights and the community that helps leaders build AI confidence in themselves and in their teams. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Talent in the Age of AI podcast, where we explore how AI is reshaping work, leadership, and talent development. One of the questions we come back to often on this show is simple. What does all of this mean for talent development leaders? Because in the rush to talk about AI tools, productivity, and automation, it can be easy to lose sight of something fundamental, the learner, the human. So our guest today has spent her career advocating for exactly that. Deidre Alves is the Chief Learning and Leadership Officer at ExuLAB Global, where she focuses on experiential learning, leadership development, and the integration of what she calls human plus AI literacy in organizations. She previously served as Chief Learning Officer for the International Right of Way Association, where she led learning strategy for an 18,000 member organization and oversaw tens of thousands of learner experiences. Deidre brings a unique perspective to this conversation because she's worked deeply at the intersection of technology, leadership, development, and the science of human learning. She's also someone who describes herself as having been a hard sell on AI at first, which makes her journey toward AI fluency especially interesting and I think particularly relatable to a lot of us. So today we'll explore why she believes the learner must remain first, front and center, why AI fluency matters for learning leaders, and how organizations can begin blending AI with experiential learning in meaningful ways. Deidre, welcome to the Talent in the Age of AI podcast.
Jason, thank you so much for having me. It's quite an honor to be here today.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you. Your experience and your insight on this topic, it's exciting. So I'm excited for this conversation.
It is really exciting. And learning and development, talent development, organizational development, it all fits under that umbrella. It's an exciting time for all of us as learning leaders. It's a great frontier to enter into in this next evolution of L&D.
Yes, it is. All right, well, let's jump right in. First question is, you talk a lot about keeping the learner first, front, and center. Why is that message so important right now as organizations kind of are in this mad rush to adopt AI?
Yes, and I'm so glad you used the word, mad rush without sounding hypey or fear-based at all. The reality is that AI has a certain velocity to it. It has a certain momentum and speed, scale, what I like to call exponentiality to it in its nature. And so, what I've seen across organizations, and I've had the opportunity to see a vast array and spectrum of organizations, everything from my work in infrastructure development as CLO there, as you mentioned, for IRWA, to my work now at ExuLAB and all of the consultancies I've had. The one thing that rings true is, and I hope a lot of your listeners can identify with this, is that the whole L&D, and I'm going to say L&D is learning and development, talent development field, is in various spectrum of adoption. And by that, I mean, some of the organizations out there, maybe you all can identify, are just, even, maybe in the second or third or first or 60 days of getting an LMS, a learning management system, or an LXP, a learning experience platform, which is a technology that is able to provide content to organizations in a digital fashion. I know that I had built, as CLO, I had built a university platform using an LMS when the LMSs were kind of just starting out. And I really, even back then, which wasn't that long ago, really wanted to have the university feel both human, physical, as well as digital. So I built that space with the learner first, front and center. And that's like really a huge message. So you have organizations in the beginning stages. Some organizations don't even have LMSs, which is fine. And then, you have somewhere in the middle. And then you have those, organizations that are going full throttle with AI. And the velocity that we talk about is so important because you got to get on the train. And as you said, like I was a late adopter to this, and I'm kind of embarrassed by it, but also wear it as a badge of honor because I know others are in this boat as well. And the idea of, trying to meet you where you are is kind of what we want to do. All the while, the velocity of AI is just going faster and faster. So it's kind of like a balance. One of the messages I have today as we go through our conversation is to try to take even a small step, an action step today after this podcast to see how you can get an AI literacy in yourself as a leader. We're going to talk more about that, but the
Mhm.
velocity is there, it's real and it's happening, and it's not going anywhere, and there's a lot of potential
Mhm.
to it, which we're going to get into.
Yeah, it seems as though, like a lot of things in life, I don't want to say a healthy amount of, I don't want to say skepticism, but just the importance to pause, right? And sort of get your bearings with AI and what you want to do with it and where you're going with it, because it is moving so fast that it's easy to just kind of hop on the train and keep rolling, right? Without ever slowing down or taking a stop to kind of take stock of where you are and where your organization is. So,
And you're talking about such a critical piece that in organizations, there's no time to stop. There's no time to pause. There's no time to reflect. Learning leaders especially are faced with, a tremendous responsibility to prove ROI and prove that learning's working and get the technology and get the results and get the scale
mhm.
that this is almost a detriment to L&D and the space because we do need to have thoughtful pause when we are adopting this AI technology with the vast majority of us, me included, just learning. And a lot of people are in, like I said, are in different stages of adoption. And so trying to run this race is difficult and challenging.
Mhm.
And I do advocate for learning leaders with their boards of directors, working in tandem with their CEOs, advocate for pause.
Yeah, and I think that's, I'm sure, important for their workforce too. I think employees and people within organizations that these leaders lead, I'm sure, feel the pressure to incorporate AI in what they're doing, and I'm sure they feel a lot of the pressure from above too. So,
The pressure is real too, because a lot of organizations, most recently, a couple of years or so, it's now become mandated that learning and
mhm.
development provide certain in regards to their human capital assets. I hate that kind of
Mhm.
term, but
Yeah.
and that kind of muddies the water too, because it produces another amount of stress for certain organizations that are in compliant to be in compliance with
Mhm.
this.
Yeah.
So that adds a whole other dimension of seriousness, velocity to prove. And Jason, where's our learner in all of this proving?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and we can touch more on sort of the data and the measurement aspect of this a little later, but just staying on this idea of losing sight of the learner, perhaps, in all this. One idea that you previously shared with me that really stuck with me was that we need to understand the nature of human learning before we try to understand AI learning. What do you mean by that?
Yes. So in my work with organizations and learning leaders, there are learning leaders and those who have told me that they kind of just, and I'm sure the listeners can identify with this because I hear this all the time, they kind of just got thrown into learning and development. Now think about this, Jason. How can you just get thrown into learning and development? How can you just get thrown into accounting? How can you get thrown into marketing or thrown into law or thrown into being a medical professional?
Yeah.
That's almost impossible, right? And so the story, and usually it's the tech department, the tech vertical that gets put into these learning and development functions. So you have learning and development professionals that do not have a learning background. As
Mhm.
chief learning officer, you know my opinion is that you must know learning. And I have my master's degree in this stuff. And it really is a game changer because your gaze is always through the lens of the learner.
Mm.
You have a human development perspective. You know the cadence of learning. You know different methods of learning. You know how different approaches might work. And incorporating experiential learning, which is
Mhm.
something I do at ExecuLab all the time, is having an experiential lens. And for those of you out there, experiential learning is learning by doing.
Mm.
Very rarely a PowerPoint is used. It celebrates the physical world, the sensory experience of learning, your five senses, as well as a three-part formula. And you can jot this down if you want to, start your foray into experiential learning, and then how we can apply it within the world of AI. A briefing with your learner on an experience, then an experience, whatever that learning experience is, and then a massive debrief. But here's where the most important part is: it's in the reflection on that experience, it's
Mm.
in the application back to the business. And that's where you get, such stunning human performance, because it's also highly memorable. And I talk about memorability and things in some of the articles that I've written. Strong memory produces strong results.
Mm.
So there's a lot there, but having that undergirding of human development and human learning makes you in a great posture to be able to take kind of like whatever thrown at you with where the currents are taking us within learning and development, because you're moored to learning, you're moored to the learner, you're moored to human development, the mind, the art and science of education and learning. And that is so critical.
So it's really important then for leaders in this talent development space to really try to carve out the space for that reflection, like you've said, and working and understanding how their people learn at the same time or beforehand, preferably, right? They move forward with these AI tools and implementing the technology.
Yes, so it's very important for advocacy and creating space in the organization to have reflection time, to be able to pause, slow down, not just with the AI currents that are happening, but with your whole learning strategy. One of the things that worked very well for me as chief learning officer was working in tandem with the CEO. I invited the CEO to and the boards, to the board directors and such, to come with me to conferences, to know the beat and rhythm of learning and development, to be lockstep with the business objectives as well as the learning objectives. But we can't forget about the learner objectives too. So often the learner is the third, leg of the stool. You've got alignment. You must have alignment between your business objectives, your learning objectives, but your learner needs as well. And so in the experiential piece, or in any type of learning, any type of learning experience, a reflection is so unbelievably important, especially with experiential learning, because the formula for experiential learning is to do a briefing, which is kind of like a pre-reflection, so to speak, on what you're going to experience. What do you think you're going to see, feel, hear, observe? How do you think this, experience is going to impact you? Then your experience, whatever that learning experience is, and then the massive debrief. And that's really where the magic is, because the learner is reflecting on their learning, and then they are applying what they've learned back into the business. And that is so key, because experiential learning provides for a lot of what I like to call strong memory or memorability. So there's a lot of ability to apply what you've learned back
Mhm.
into your business, and then that really celebrates and supports human performance across the organization. So
Mhm.
that reflection piece is important from an organizational perspective for your learning leaders as well as for your learners. One thing I wanted to add there is, currently, I would say in the last, maybe I could be wrong, some people might debate me on this, you know, 8 months, something like that, maybe 6 months, there's been a push for, in the age of AI, learning leaders and learning designers must be contextual architects instead of
Mm. Yeah.
content designers. And the focus, and people are really beating this drum to
Mhm.
be able to provide learning experiences from a curation perspective as a contextual architect in the world of AI and in physical learning, whatever your learning strategy is, instead of not just, I shouldn't say that because it's a very important thing to be a content designer, a person who is in charge of the whole strategy of your learning organization to design, specific content or bring in different vendors or whatnot. So there's this movement now, and especially in the age of AI, that I'm seeing is learning leaders being contextual architects, providing curation of resources, learning experiences that
Mhm.
can be chosen and self-directed by the learner, that is either internal resources, external resources. So the learning leader provides the context for learning to take place. And I think there's a lot of wealth of opportunity for delving into an experiential format and kind of supporting this contextual architect
Mhm.
framework. But I do want to say that from my experience, I think the winning formula is to be a contextual architect as well as a content designer, a strategist. It's not just one or the other or certain reframes. It's kind of like a mosaic, and that's where the thoughtful understanding of your learner needs, your organizational needs, come into play, and getting
Mhm.
that alignment.
Yeah. The discussion about what you just mentioned about the learner needs and the needs of the organization, it reminds me, or it gets me thinking about one of the things that we've been writing about on the Talent in the Age of AI blog, in that AI isn't just changing work, but it's exposing where organizations have already underinvested in human capability, perhaps. So things like judgment and adaptability and decision making, and they suddenly matter even more, right? With when you're introducing AI into that. So have you seen that too? Do you see that happening in organizations, sort of some of those other things that are coming to surface now with the introduction of AI?
Absolutely. It's kind of putting a spotlight on what are called soft skills, or I like to call them human skills, sometimes power skills, social skills, being able to have in communication. It's your communication skills that are very lacking. And I've noticed this in younger generations coming up. They're so thirsty for guidance in how to be able to communicate. Many trends and ebbs and flows of society have influenced the younger generation's ability to, and I don't want to sweep it with a brush, but it's what I've been seeing from coast to coast, even, and being able to connect, being able to provide effective communication, being able to listen. So that in the world of AI has even put more of a spotlight on that need. And that's why the human AI readiness is so important, because it's kind of like, how I see it is like a Venn diagram. It's like you've got your human and you've got your AI, but then you've got the overlapping of
Mhm.
both. And again, it's knowing the nature of human learning that we talked about, and knowing the nature of AI, which we're going to get into, really helps you to understand, okay, thoughtfully where these pieces interact. What do I need in my organization? What do my hypos need, my high potentials, my rising stars, my early talent? What do they need? What do my senior executives need? What do my middle managers need? And being able to thoughtfully kind of diagnose what's needed, both at a short term as well as long term vision, plugging that into your strategic plan, picking the right medicine, so to speak. Your AI, is it physical, is
Mhm.
it learning platforms, is it even going, we even talked about AR and VR, augmented reality, virtual reality, XR, mixed reality. So it's like, not so I think the most powerful thing for learning leaders, chief learning officers especially, is to upskill in human learning and
Mhm.
upskill in getting to know the nature of AI. And not that, I'm an advocate for our learning leaders not to become fluent in AI. I mean, I recently took a course in the ethics of AI bias, and I was trying to learn AI myself. I am never going to be one of these amazing academicians. I don't even know if that's a word, but the people from the academic world being able to be so proficient in that. But as a learning leader, I do have a responsibility to have a working vernacular of what it isn't, and knowing the nature of AI so that I can help organizations make good decisions in deploying AI, and also saving a lot of money from your corporate pocketbook, because in the frenzy of all this AI, with all this pressure, learning leaders are not slowing down. They're not reflecting. I'm not trying to be fearful or anything or hype it up, but this is kind of a reality that, they don't have time, and they're just kind of, picking vendors or picking platforms to show they've done something when it
Mhm.
may not be the right fit, and you might be ending up way in the as a result. Whereas if you had a knowledge, you were prepared, you had a literacy, a basic literacy, you could make good judgment, thoughtful discernment on how to deploy and how to do this in an effective way, and you're going to like your results, hopefully more so by doing it and investing in the time up front.
AI isn't just coming, it's here. But for HR and L&D leaders, the real challenge isn't the technology. It's translating AI into workforce capability and leadership behavior. At Talent in the Age of AI, we center everything around one question. So what? What does AI actually mean for how you develop people and prepare your organization? Don't just react to change, lead it. Become a member today at talentintheageofai.com.
Mhm. Yeah, so kind of staying on that topic, that difference between AI fluency and AI literacy, or AI expertise and AI literacy. Can you talk just a little bit more about that difference and why the AI literacy might be the more realistic expectation for leaders today, who, like you said, are already have so much on their plates?
Beautiful. I love how you say the more realistic option, because there is a push for an AI fluency. And, I do advocate for AI literacy. Having an AI literacy to me is having an awareness of what AI is, what AI does, its potential, where we are now. It's going to be changing a lot. The AI we have now is going to be evolving, and to be able to have a working kind of vernacular of AI, certain terms that are used, and also being able to, and I keep saying this, in my mind, like, know the nature of AI. I was embarrassing a late adopter, but knew it as my responsibility, and that was my motivation for getting to know AI, was that I had a responsibility to the industry. I had a responsibility to the people that I serve and organizations as a whole, the world, humanity, to be able to know AI, to know it in a way that I could understand. It enables me to know, to make good decisions and good guidance. One of the biggest things I learned, and Jason, I don't even know if we've talked about this before, but in my preparation, it came to me when I took the Ethics of AI Bias course at this very great university. It was an online course. It taught me the fact, and these are like gurus in the field, right? It
Mhm.
taught me that the people who are responsible for AI and all of your algorithms, and I'm not going to get techie in anything, any space, but in this course, I learned that the majority, I'm not trying to paint things with a broad brush, but the majority of people involved in this field of computer science and algorithms, the mathematics side of things, the left brain world of AI, has a very tremendous responsibility to humanity to get it right. Whoa, let that sink in for a minute. I never thought that these people, a responsibility to humanity. I had my own bias about somehow it was this nefarious thing that's going to kind of take over the world. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, maybe it's both. Who knows? But it's a tool. And knowing that, it's of ethics of AI bias, they try to get the algorithms perfectly, but we're not in a perfect world, are we? And it's up to us to discern. It's up to us to make the ultimate use of the tool. So it's not the tool using us, it's we're using the tool. I thought it was really interesting that there are people, at the other end of this that actually do care. Now, are there nefarious things going on? Sure, and like everything. But to hear that there was a responsibility to get it right, whatever right means. And and the premise of the course was that it really relies on us to know ourselves and to be able to use that, our own judgment, to be able to make the best decisions we can together and individually, etc. So that was really eye-popping for me. And as a learning leader, I mean, imagine the learning leaders out there. Like, my thing is, what action step are you going to take right after this? Even small, even go look and see if there's some AI, courses that you could take, carve out time, do some deep work, get to know AI, get to know the nature of it so that you can know what it is and who it is as well. It's fascinating stuff, especially for L&D.
Yeah, and specifically back to this idea of ethics and bias, obviously important in any field and any walk of life, but it's not too difficult to think of how important it is and how crucial it is in the field of talent development, HR, and hiring and learning programs. So much at stake and things to keep their eye on in terms of ethics and bias with
And
that.
you have to be aware. You have to have that AI literacy to some extent, and hire people and teams that have a knowledge or an awareness of the bias implications. I think that sometimes, because it's so high stakes and because we're in such a litigious society, unfortunately, obvious, it's terrible, right? But it stops innovation. And I've worked with leaders, organizational leaders, TD leaders, L&D leaders from an organizational perspective and I would say this is since the pandemic, but it's actually become, worse, that leaders, maybe some of you leaders can identify with this, is like, you kind of freeze because you don't want to go left and you don't want to go right. You don't want to risk losing your job, right? You don't want to make decisions that you need to make. You don't want to advocate when you need to advocate. You don't want to stand true when you're the cheese that stands alone. So it's very tenuous. And, you don't want to make a wrong decision. And sometimes that's an impediment, adoption, especially with AI in the field of talent and talent development, learning and development. So, one thing I have as a possible hope in this to mitigate that is to not get mired in the operations of things and the guardrails and the this and that, although very important. I'm not saying that they're not, but create a space in your organization for experimentation, for exploration, for true learning to take place. A human learning is an endeavor of ambiguity. These are all things that an organization and your CEO would be like, don't do that, boards, no. But if you carve out a right spot, because I've done this myself, if you carve out the right spot with the right leaders who are able to break new ground, who are able to go there in a safe way, I mean, this is the Wild West, you are able to iterate, you are able to experiment, because these are pilots that you are choosing to do. You're practicing. Have people sign disclaimers that they want to participate. I mean, I'm right now an agent for the work that I'm doing. I'm kind of creating another me. And right on there, I have a disclaimer. And you can choose to participate if you want to or you don't want to. So kind of like all your bases are covered, but you're still able to innovate. You're still able to experiment. I also recommend that because the AI companies kind of they're in a business. They want to make money. Ask them, because when I work with vendors, I always look for the right fit of a vendor that is going to be to ebb and flow with me as a learning leader. So ask them, are they willing to do a pilot with you? Can you test out their platform or their solution for a limited time, and then maybe test out something else and maybe test out something else until you get the Goldilocks fit for your organization. And this takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of bravery for learning leaders to be able to do this. So your best fit, you have learning leaders who are equipped with a background in learning, preferably, a master's or something like that, or even, willingness to learn about human development and human learning, as well as an AI literacy, and a leader who is able to forge forward, to build forward, to be able to get the innovation that's so needed. It takes a certain mindset, a certain leader mindset, courage, bravery, and some able to lead the way for your organization. And I think with that approach, I think that's kind of a nice spot that people would feel comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely. You've introduced a really interesting phrase, data absolutism. Can you explain what you mean by that and why it can be so dangerous for organizations?
Yeah, so I wrote a blog called Chief Learning Officers: Why You Must Balance the Metric with the Magic. And the article talks about how organizations, and I kind of alluded to this before, are mired in data OI, must prove ROI, must prove ROI. Well, the learner gets lost in the shuffle because there's such this mad rush to prove it's all working. Sometimes learning initiatives, whatever they may be, don't kind of take hold or provide those metrics, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. I advocate for
Mhm.
organizations to, if they're going to do metrics, yes, they can do all of the mecs that are, standard practice, but have attitudinal metrics, have Likert scales for empowerment, confidence building. How confident are you as a leader after doing A, B, or C? How effective was this intervention in A, B, or C, objective that you're trying to achieve? Really, specific strategic metrics. Those are helpful. And I alluded to the fact that in some instances, it's a compliance requirement that you must provide this data for, continued viability for your organization without getting
Mhm.
fines or things like that. So that's all, fear. So,
Mhm.
while data is good, and I want this to be very clear, data is important, data is good. We must know what's going on in our organization. We must make reasonable choices, but not to the detriment of the magic. And in the article, I write about, and I kind of take this from my friend Al. You might know him, Albert Einstein. And I wrote this down. So I want to kind of say his quote here. And prior to this, there is an adage in learning and development that if you can't measure it, then it doesn't matter. You have to be able to measure something in your organization. And, for my friend Al here, Albert Einstein, not everything that counts can be counted, and not
Mm.
everything that can be counted counts. And I'll say it again, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. And I think that really invites learning leaders to just at least be open to experimentation, having that space within the organization to be able to innovate and explore
Mhm.
without, detriment to pilot. And, you know, because the data absolutism, you know, data can be manipulated, data can be
Mhm.
bloated, data can fit a scenario that you're trying to, prove or push. It may be accurate, it may not be accurate. So the certainty that people look for, especially the CLO or the L&D management team, can prove this to the CEO, they get to keep their jobs and everything's great. Meanwhile, the learner is somewhere, I don't know, where's learner? And,
Mhm.
you forget that the very things that can help move the needle aren't even
Mhm.
explored. One of the things that I talk about is like I write about like these case studies. And one of them I really want to talk about here is that, there was a prestigious hospital. I'm not going to, name the name. If you experience this, you might know it. And maybe other hospitals have adopted this since, but they were in oncology. I don't know, many people have to unfortunately identify with this. You got to get MRIs, you got to go through that tube. Everyone hates it. It's like scary and booming and loud. And who wants to do it? And on top of it, it's like an hour, right? So no one wants to be a part of any of this, and it's scary. So imagine there were kids, it was a pediatric unit, pediatric
Mm.
oncology, and the children crying, screaming, kicking, the whole 9 yards, not wanting to go in this, machine. Now, the data proved the MRI efficacy. It proved that it hit all the data points, the metrics, everything was perfectly in place, working fine. Great, let's go. Everyone was trained, everyone was in their spot, but the kids didn't want to go on it. And when they did go on it, they're moving, they're, wiggling about because, they're kids and they don't want to be in it so long. So you're not getting accurate results anyway. So it's a fail, even though you have all the metrics, right? You got all the data points, you got all the science behind it. So the team, valiantly and were very brave, came up with the idea to think outside the box, think very creatively, kind of tap into the world of magic, the felt world, the world of feelings, emotions, experience. That's why I love experiential learning so much. And they decided to make this MRI machine and the whole room into a cosmic adventure. So the MRI machine
Mm.
actually became a spaceship. This is a true story. Now, of course, it was the MRI. They didn't make it into a real spaceship, but they, brought in people, made it kind of really colorful spaceship. They kind of like a story around it where the kids were going to go take this ride. So the kids loved it, and might I say adults would like this too. I know I would like this. They were excited as much as possible to kind of go in, take the
Mhm.
ride, go through. The staff were trained not to be kind of like doctors and nurses, but they were going to be like astronauts on the space ride with you, and so guess what, Jason, it worked. The kids went on, they didn't move because that was one of the things what you do in a spaceship, right? You have to pay attention and be focused. And so they went through the ride, and so they were like, can I go on it again? I mean,
Mm.
imagine. And that is an example, an illustration of, and even in, the world of AI, you know, metrics are great, data's great, but not to the detriment of that data absolutism, where you're just focused myopically on data, 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 data. Go dip your toe into
Mhm.
the world, the felt world, the world of magic. And sometimes I will provide the solution when all else fails. And may I remind you, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be
Mhm.
counted counts.
Mhm. I love that story. And as is always the case, right? It's also about learning leaders, talent development leaders, setting clear goals and expectations of the data up front, right? To the people they need to report the data to, their leaders of their organizations, members of the C suite, to convince them or educate them on what you talked about as far as what can be counted and what can't be counted and what effective and meaningful data can look like.
And you hit a
Yeah.
beautiful point, because the learning leaders, I kind of bristle at the term, well, we need a seat at the table. No, you have a seat at the table. Take your seat and start educating. I coached for a federal agency, I coached an individual on this very thing, where the solution that, we came up with was to educate others on your method, educate others on your reasoning. And I think it's so important for learning leaders to be able to do that. Yes, you're going to pay homage to your data, not, but to be able to have courage and be brave to be able to set the expectations for what the data can reveal, what it can't reveal, and to
Mhm.
focus on your learner. In that case of the spaceship or so, the learner inadvertently was the patient, right? We can kind of blame the learner for that in a way. You know, what worked for science and what worked for the hospital and the organization and the board on the hospital, and was not the magic. What worked for the learner was the magic. Now you had to have
Mhm.
like a connection between the two. but illustrating and educating your CEO on the potential for even greater benefit, greater usage, greater adoption, setting conditions. It's one thing also I write about for creating conditions, the optimal conditions for learning to take place in whatever world you're talking about, physical world or the artificial, important, and framing those things. So you're kind of paying homage to what you need to pay homage to, while also, as a learning leader, this is like your responsibility to forge forward. And now it's really, really important to be able to have those discussions bravely. And when you're equipped with some sort of knowledge and learning and knowledge in AI, having a little AI literacy or digital literacy, you're able to have these conversations in a way that people can understand and can get behind, and you don't miss the world. You're balancing the metric with the magic.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. And like with everything we do at Talent in the Age of AI, I want to bring it all back to one central question. So, what does all this mean for leaders in the talent development field? So, what are some key takeaways from our conversation today that they can use right away in their own careers and their own organizations? What points do you really want to stick with our listeners?
Yeah, and I would go back to my own journey in AI adoption and learning about AI is learning leaders, get some sort of AI literacy, take a course, explore AI, even the first principles of AI and the algorithms and the data sets. It doesn't have to be arduous. Get to know the nature of AI, talk to people. A great opportunity for learning leaders, and this is something that I want to pioneer as well, is getting the world of academia in harmony with the world of industry and having discussions take place so one informs the other, I think is very important. So, learning leaders get to know the nature, not just the platform or the vendor, but to know what AI is. I kind of develop my own definition. It's a giant aggregator of stuff that makes decisions and takes actions that may or may not be accurate, that also are getting like more intelligent even with the actions and the decisions that they're making. So get to know the nature of AI, get an AI literacy going that fits with your leading personality. Be true to the learning leader that you are. Find your own motivation. For me, it was, I'm a leader in this industry of talent development and learning development, organizational development. My motivation was being that reason within yourself to get to know AI, make friends with AI. My motivation was, I have a responsibility as a learning leader to know this stuff in some capacity so that I can help and guide, suggest, etc. So that's one thing. AI literacy, get to know AI. The second thing would be, I'm going to go back to it. Don't leave today. Don't leave Jason, and don't leave me today after watching this and kind of go back to your meetings or go back to your computer, whatever. Take a walk, go somewhere. What one thing, even to move yourself towards understanding talent and development in the age of AI, what can you do? Is it taking a course? Is it just kind of popping on the computer and saying, what's this ethics of AI bias course all about? Where'd you take it? Whatever. I'll be happy to answer any questions. What could you do? Like really take that action step, even if it's small. Okay. So it's AI literacy. Take that action step. Action. And my third thing is, in the world of AI, don't forget your learner.
Yes, yeah. And I really appreciate that reminder that in all the excitement around AI, the learner still has to remain at the center of the learning experience. So thanks again for joining us today.
I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and all of the talent in the age of AI, talent development in the AI community.
Yeah. And thanks to everyone listening to the Talent in the Age of AI podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us on Spotify or Apple so you don't miss any of our conversations about how AI is transforming work, leadership, and talent development. You can also follow Talent in the Age of AI on LinkedIn to stay up to date on new episodes and all of our insights from across the field that we post on our website. So until next time, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Talent in the Age of AI. If this conversation gave you new ways to grow in your own work and to better support your people, follow the show and share it with others in your HR and talent network. Members get even more: full episode transcripts, extended show notes, and companion resources to help you put these insights into action. Learn more and join us at talentintheageofai.com. We're here to help leaders create, curate, and connect what's needed to build tomorrow's workforce today. See you next time.